My name is Greg Rosenberg. I'm the Executive Director of the Madison Area Community Land Trust. We're a nonprofit organization that builds affordable housing that's affordable forever. We protect green spaces. We own land where there's a farm and a prairie and community gardens up at Troy Gardens, and that's what we're going to be talking about here. I come from a background as a fair housing advocate. And so when I came to the Land Trust in 2001, my challenge was to do all that stuff that I always told everybody else to do. And I had a big mouth, and I told people to do a lot of stuff when it came to accessible housing. And so I really created quite a situation for myself because I had to walk my talk. And one of the smartest things I did was hire Jim Glick as our architect. And besides him being a nice person and all that, one thing is that Jim designs his you know, Steve Levine was talking about your general assumption is accessibility from the keynote. Well, Jim, as an architect, assumes accessibility. So we didn't have a lot of, well, what do the accessibility guidelines say about this or this? It was just part of the basic language that we used, which made for a very enjoyable experience. And we got to focus on issues like usability, instead of, well, what does ADA say here and what does Federal Fair Housing Act say here? So it made for a wonderful experience. And now, here we go. I'm supposed to stand, I don't know, is this okay? All right. Version 1.0. Version 6.0 will be awesome, I guarantee it. All right. Now, there's an entry, a first section here, talking about sustainable development. It's a term that's being used a lot. Sustainability usually is referred to from an environmental impact perspective. But one thing we've been playing around with at the Land Trust is thinking about sustainability from a larger, more inclusive perspective. At its base, it means thinking in very long-term time horizons, not just thinking about 5 or 10 years, but just really thinking about 100 years. And what will this place be like over 100 years? What will it be like to live here? What will the impact of this place be on the surrounding community over a 100-year period of time? And again, getting to Jim's point from the previous workshop, the earlier you start thinking about this stuff, the easier. And it also, you need to think about it all the time. There's a certain mindfulness to doing this kind of work that's critical. So each time we're making a decision about something, no matter how minor, it's like, okay, well, how will this work for this person or this person? Or how hard will this be to repair in 15 years? You know, those kinds of things. So thinking early and often. Now again, this isn't like the official components of sustainability. This is just how I think about it. And this is, you know, not brilliant stuff. It just means you think about the environment, both micro in terms of the environment within your site, and then environment in terms of the impact beyond your site. So like if you have a bus stop right in front of the project that you're doing, it makes for less auto emissions, for example. That would be a macro example. Durability, particularly if you're doing housing for folks of low to moderate income who are going to own their home, it needs to last, because if you're building stuff and in 7 years it starts falling apart, you're setting people up for failure. And then in terms of repairability, it means, all right, stuff needs to get fixed at some point, and are you designing it in a way so somebody can, you know, easily replace a water heater or a furnace? For example, at Troy Gardens, we had a big discussion about, all right, how's somebody going to pull the old water heater out of here, remember? And it's like, you know, ad nauseum, we talked about it, but we figured it out because we knew in whatever 20 years that water heater needed to come out. We didn't want somebody to have to take a wall down to do that. And then livability is the last piece, and that's what we're going to be focusing on here. Now, when we're thinking about livability, usually we think in terms of how the place works for the person who's moving in right now at their present level of functionality with no change in their usability needs. Well, that's just one little moment in time for that particular person's lifespan. Let's think instead over livability over the entire lifespan. Livability means never having to move. One of our key goals at Troy Gardens, people move in and they don't have to move out because they can no longer physically live in that space because the space doesn't work for them. And now with housing prices, people's ability to move isn't as easy as it was 20 years ago. You don't have your starter house, then your trade-up house, then your ultimate house, and then your, your nice condo, whatever. People don't have that 4 or 5 houses. People are going to want to move into a home and stay there for a very long period of time. Okay, fair housing, and this relates to something that Steve talked about in his keynote. Of course, you can't put up a sign that says no blacks, Latinos, gays, or lesbians. But if you build a home with 1 or 2 steps to the front door, you're sending that same message to folks who use wheelchairs. And my kids will tell you when I take my daughter out to her drum lesson in the suburbs, and on that street are like 10 houses with 2 steps. And every time I drive by, I start yelling. And anyway. They'll look back in that and find that funny, but they don't right now. All right, universal design. And again, I apologize that this isn't the most brilliant statement of it, but this is just kind of the way, as kind of as an advocate who's doing development, this is the way I think about it. Usually we teach about accessibility by referencing all kinds of laws, and the laws are important. I mean, they really, really are. But what do you do when there's no applicable law, and particularly single-family housing? There's no applicable accessibility law. So what are we supposed to do? Does that mean we do nothing? Is that what the message should be? I don't think so. Universal means everyone is included. So this mindfulness piece that I was talking about means being mindful at all times of all the possible occupants of a home at all points in their lifespans, as well as all of their guests over the entire lifespan of the structure. All right, so that's like all the people who are going to interact with that building over a 100-year period, and thinking about all of them when you're designing and building a home. Once you get the hang of it, it's not as hard as you might think. But, I mean, that's a lot to be mindful about. All right, now when we're thinking about livability or usability, kind of what does that really refer to? It refers to the basic stuff. Now I'll use my laser pointer. All right. We enter and we exit. We go to the bathroom and we wash various parts of our body. We eat, we hang out, we sleep. That's the stuff we do. That's not complicated conceptually, but in practice, making sure that homes are usable for as many people as possible, it can get complicated, particularly if you don't plan well. So if you remember only one thing, it's just like figure stuff out as early as you can, because the earlier you figure it out, the more you can do and the less money it costs. Now let's put this into action, shall we? Now there's more pictures coming soon. Welcome to Troy Gardens. This is the statement from the Friends of Troy Gardens that manages the open spaces at Troy Gardens. We envision a world where people live and learn together in sustainable communities, and where all people have the tools to grow food and steward the environment. So we're just going to talk about one little piece of Troy Gardens. If we're talking about all of Troy Gardens, we would have you here all day long. So we're just talking about the accessibility pieces of Troy Gardens. All right, now Caribous. All right, who did Caribous? Saul did Caribous. I mean, other people, of course, but Saul was very involved, and other people know the history much better than I do. But Troy Gardens would not have happened in any shape or form in terms of us being able to buy the land, permanently protect it, and do all this housing would not have happened without Saul. And so, got to put a picture of Saul anytime we're talking about this. All right, Troy Gardens. It's on the northeast side of town. This is Lake Mendota, and this is kind of where it is on the bigger map. And then once we're over here, this is Troy Drive, Central Wisconsin Center. Remember that, because that comes up in a story you'll hear about later. And the Mendota Mental Health Institute is over to the west. And so it's really this area highlighted here was 31 acres owned by the state of Wisconsin that they declared surplus in the mid-1990s. And that set off a whole chain of events. This is what it looked like from the air, I don't know, 10 years ago. So this is the area. This is the community garden. This is where it used to be. Housing's going to show up here. And then this is this back area where nobody had done much with. And then this is an old railroad, abandoned railroad spur there. And then this is a conceptual drawing that would show Troy Gardens with housing, gardens, prairie, and a farm up in this corner. And this stuff is all here. It's all here right now. This part is more mud than green right now. But you'll notice it has kind of this interesting circulation plan. And that's to keep asphalt out of the green space areas, which created an accessibility challenge as well. And this is from an airplane. I love this picture. This was taken this summer. So you can see the farm, there's the prairie, the community gardens, and then this is the housing site about halfway through construction. And we're going to have the guy who does those kite photos. Once we're done, we're going to have him come out and do some stuff. So this is kind of more of the official site plan. And it's really 5 acres for housing, 5 acres for gardens, 5 for prairie, 5 for farm. It's just interesting how it just kind of worked out like that. And again, Troy Gardens was not the result of some brilliant person 10 years ago concocting it. It was part of this extensive, long-term, neighborhood-based planning process. So we own all the land out there. We lease 26 acres to the Friends of Troy Gardens. Urban Open Space holds a conservation easement to protect the green spaces. And then we reserve 5 acres to build some housing. Now, what I did is I pulled some stuff from before we broke ground. Remember this plan early? Well, this is back 3 years ago. I don't know, Jim, if you remember, we were coming up with our design philosophy. I was very pretentious because I had just read a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright stuff. So I wanted to have this stuff. But anyway, maximize community involvement, protect green spaces, minimize impact of motor vehicles, maximize accessibility, and foster a sense of community. And we did all of those. Accessibility was number 4, wasn't number 1. The way I look at it, if accessibility is in your top 5, it's going to happen. If accessibility is number 11 in your list of priorities, it's not going to happen because you can't do more than 10 things. Usually you can't do more than 3. But, all right, Dave Schaefer. I just got to read this. I wrote this in 2004 for our newsletter. Who here knew Dave? Dave was a longtime employee of the city and a fabulous advocate for accessibility issues, and I can't read it because I'll start crying. So anyway, it's there. So when we build housing, we build it for Dave. All right. Back in 2002, early, right? We didn't break ground until 2006. But in 2002, we're talking about accessibility. We wanted all first levels of all units to be accessible, the pedestrian pathway system, a common house, which we haven't built yet, accessible, and we wanted to have parking and drop-off points close to some units to accommodate people with disabilities. And we did it. But if we hadn't planned it, we couldn't have done it. And this is just kind of the basics, 30 units total, 12 two-bedroom and 18 three-bedroom. That's a typo. All units, whether they're 1 or 2 story, essentially are a barrier-free first floor unit with 1 bedroom, minimum of 1 bedroom and a full bath. And we're doing all this Energy Star and Green Built Home. We have solar upgrades. About half of the units have either solar, hot water, or photovoltaic. And really important thing, we're using energy recovery ventilators. And that regulates moisture, it brings in fresh air. It's great for everybody, but particularly for folks with disabilities, really having fresh air when you have a super tight house is a really good thing. Troy Gardens is based on co-housing, which came from Denmark, and of course, came from all other parts of the world as well. We've got 30 units, 20 are income restricted for buyers at 80% or below county median, and we have 10 market rate homes. We've not done market rate homes before. The median income for our buyers at Troy Gardens was 60% for the income restricted units, which was our target, so we were quite happy about that. And there's the pricing. Again, 2-bedroom income restricted homes, $109,500. It's a fabulous price relative to the market. But in terms of what people could afford, it's still a lot of money. If we had sold those 2 bedrooms for $99,000, it would have opened it up for a whole lot more people. Because in our experience, keep it under $100,000 makes a big difference. But that would have meant another $10,000 in subsidy coming from somebody. And then the market rate units were $40,000 to $50,000 more. But again, these were all substantially, our income restricted units on average sold $40,000 to $50,000 below market value. We had to raise a ton of money. Thank you, City of Madison. That big chunk there was a collaboration between the CDBG office and Representative Tammy Baldwin's office. All right, so here's the site plan. And Jim, any point you want to jump in, please interrupt. This is our roadway and parking. Again, we wanted to strike a balance between keeping it out of the green space areas, but having it close to units. And then we also drove us to do rear walkways, so people didn't have to go all the way around. Now there's a sum here. This isn't the final layout. There's 6 units where we had to put stairs in the rear walk because of grading issues. So everybody's front door is accessible, and 24 of the 30 units, no. Some of them didn't have rear walkways at all. So anyway, number one, we wanted to have one accessible entrance into all units, and wherever possible, 2. But again, site conditions really placed a limit on that. And this is our rendering that we used in our marketing that Jim did. That is very nice. This is our groundbreaking invitation that Shireen put together. We had about 2 weeks from when we decided to do it till we did it, so it was kind of nuts. And there's Shireen shoveling, and there's Mayor Dave and Tammy, and then March Pitts on the left. Our board member's been very involved. That was a very big day. Oh, there's Connie, one of our presenters. And then here you go, from start to finish, a building. Oh, don't forget the solar panels. There you go. It's a little, I compressed the picture so it looks like it's 60 feet tall. But anyway, this is the first building that we built. It's got 3 units. And there's a PV panel that hasn't gone in yet. So this had 2-bedroom unit here, 1 story, and then 2 3-bedroom units. Hardy plank siding, because it lasts a long time. That's part of that durability piece. That's part of sustainability. And this is just the same unit from another angle. Now, one thing we'll do, each unit will have the option of having a fenced-in, private, outdoor living space out this back area, and that will be accessible. We're not the final grade yet, so it looks like a stair. But this is the issue we had in construction with this unit, is that we wanted to show, and we had to put in a little ramp there to get somebody in because we hadn't poured sidewalks yet. So, and that's another building with 2-bedroom units on the end and 3 bedrooms in the middle. I like this blue color. Architect wasn't fond of that. We had to work that one out. Well, we agreed that the red was a nice one. This will give you a little sense of the pathway system that we have here. And you'll notice, great path system and very, very little slope going into these units. And as the developer, I was saying, I don't want any slope. I want everything flat going right in. People go, all right. Well, that creates some issues. I mean, it's great for accessibility, but it causes other issues. So our first home buyers, and on the left are the 2 guys that built their homes, well, part of a larger team. All right, 1-story, 2-bedroom homes. I'm not going to quote any code to you because I rely on Jim to know that stuff. But I can tell you that state and federal accessibility law apply to a 1-story, 2-bedroom home in a multifamily project like this. Yes, he nods. All right, here's the floor plan for the unit. We have this large living/kitchen dining space here. We have a bedroom here and a bedroom there, a bathroom, and again, there's our wheelchair turning radius, and then we have a laundry here. One of the decisions we made was to have basements in all units, because by putting in a basement, we can move all the mechanical systems downstairs, which opened up a lot of room, and we decided Most people who use wheelchairs aren't going to be changing out their own furnace filters and aren't going to be adding water softener pellets. So we made a decision to go with basements, which freed up space on the first floor. And the feedback to that generally was very good.
This brings up a point that I was thinking when you had your... This brings up a point that I was thinking about when you first had your list of things that were important, eating, sleeping. You didn't have laundry. And I think that laundry is an accessible...
It's right here. Oh,
no, that's
yeah. Oh, yeah, right. I forgot. Washing clothes, not just yourself. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you need, I'm glad to see that you had it
Laundry.
here,
All right.
but you need to add it to your list in the beginning.
Okay. Yeah, I hope somebody's writing this stuff down for me somewhere. Yes.
The three bedroom, I assume the third bedroom is upstairs.
I'll get to that one next, so I'll show that one to you in a minute.
What about garages?
No garages. We asked people, would you rather have a garage or a basement? 90% of people, if they had to choose, wanted a basement. Plus, you could add covered parking later. You can't add a basement later.
Where do people park?
Surface parking.
Where is that?
I'll show you.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'll show you right here. Where is it? Where are we? All right. Here's your parking. Up there. And then we have this parking where we had to push it in to the middle there. And I'll talk about why we did that in a second. All right. Sorry about this.
Okay. Yeah, I also have a question about solar heating or solar panels. Are they on all of the homes?
We made all of the units solar hot water ready, which meant that we pre-plumbed and pre-wired everything so that you could, if you wanted to add a panel later, you could do it without having to open up any walls or anything. And so at this point, there's about 13 of the units. People opted to get solar hot water. 3 opted to have photovoltaic systems. All right, so again so one of the standards we piloted was the Focus on Energy proposed solar hot water ready standard, solar thermal standard. All right, so this is just to show you what the 2-bedroom, 1-story looks like. Here's the front door. I think that's the Moffats, is that right? Yes. All right. And this is a kitchen. A lot of folks opted to get bamboo floors. We had a very extensive upgrade package, and a lot of people wanted bamboo. This is a base package in terms of cabinets and appliances, though. And that's just another shot. All the 2-bedroom barrier-free units were end units, so they all had a lot of sunlight. That's a bathroom.
And by the way, you know, some of you were looking at these cabinets and saying, what's going on? Well, they're all removable. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
There's that laundry. See, these folks went for the Energy Star washer, which gives you the front loading. And now we'll go, I don't have like the full set of photos yet, but we will over time. Now the 2-story, 3-bedroom, we're gonna have a barrier-free first floor, which would meet the Easy Living Home standard, which you'll hear about at a workshop this afternoon. And this is where the accessibility features were voluntary on our part. So this plan will look very similar, but instead of the kitchen being up here, we put it to where that bedroom was. So you have 1 bedroom in the back, a very large bathroom, your stairs, kitchen, and then we figured people would want to have their dining room closer to the front and then their living room in the back. Now, some people may want to flip that, but we figured people would want their living room more towards the private areas of their home. And then the second floor just stacks on top of it with 2 bedrooms and a bath.
I want to point out one thing, though, that you notice the first floor is quite a bit bigger than the first floor. And I was alluding to that in my last talk, but that's a critical thing here. So you made the decision to go with the larger footprint on the first floor, and that allows that bathroom bedroom to go in without making the living space turn into nothing.
Right. You'll notice we're designing kind of with an L-shaped figure, too. So we didn't build it in the most cost-effective way. That would have been to stack it right up and down as a 2-story. So we made some decisions that, number one, would leave us with this enclosed courtyard area, number one, and then number two, enable us to put a bedroom and a full bath on the first floor without putting a squeeze on the living and dining area. All right, and these are just some shots of, this is the big room, the living and dining. These folks decided to have part of it carpeted and part of it, I don't know what that is, looks like bamboo. Now, one thing that wasn't ideal in terms of somebody with a visual impairment is we have a post here. So if you're a visitor in this house, this isn't ideal. So there were some things that we're not pretending to have done these perfect, and so we want to also be very critical of the work we did here, so our next project we could do that better. And this is a kitchen. That's a base kitchen. And that's somebody just wanted to do a little upgrade action. That's a shot of the bathroom. This cabinet here can just pull right out if you want to. And the latest facts, we broke ground in March, finished the last building in January. We have one home for sale. If you're interested, talk to Shireen. That's a market rate unit. And final site work will be complete in June. All right, I really want to quick go through some accessibility issues. We're really going to be refining this one, and I left out the window well. I can't believe I forgot the window well. All right. Jim mentioned this. How do you provide for ventilation for mechanical systems when the first floor is at ground level? So it's like, how do you get like all the stuff you need to vent out, and get the air in when your first floor is right up against the ground? And create a window bench at the same time? Whoa! What we did here is that we're building the first home, and we're just thinking we're screwed. How are we going to get all this stuff in and out of the house? Well, somebody came up with the idea, let's thicken the wall, which will enable us to bring stuff up from the basement and either bring it to the roof or bring it just to a higher location. And then that evolved into a seating area, which ended up being a marketing asset. But at the time, it was very upsetting. So one key thing about accessibility is you can't figure it all out in advance. Stuff will come up and you'll have to react. All right, so that's number one. Stormwater and level entrances. You need to pay attention to grading and landscaping issues, and you need to make sure that any holes in your foundation where you're sending out AC lines and stuff like that are tightly sealed. And that's because, all right, welcome to our world. This is during the course of construction, and this is an area that was holding a lot of water. And you'll see how low that is to the ground. What we ended up doing here is revising our grading plan to put in a retaining wall here to drain the water further away. And we are installing a bunch of yard drains. Again, we had to react to a situation as it was happening. And also, stuff looks worse before you get your topsoil and your grass planted and all that stuff. So it's going to look like this when we're done, right? But again, because you're so low to the ground, storm water means you need to be really thoughtful about grading and landscaping. Everybody needs to be able to take out their trash and recycling. This very exciting picture here is of a concrete pad where we're going to put in a dumpster enclosure, which we had to design so that somebody could get in without having to open up a door and be able to make the turns they needed to make and get to their garbage, all using a wheelchair. And we spent a disproportionate amount of time on that because it's not an inherently interesting topic, but it's very, very, very important. And then there's the finished, fabulous dumpster enclosure that took an unbelievable amount of time, but we did it right. Balancing easy access to parking with keeping parking and roadways out of the green spaces. So what we did here is we pushed the parking to the edges, except for those type A units with the highest level of accessibility, which are on the ends on this and here. We wanted to make sure that there was parking very close by. So we struck a balance where there was parking close by for some, not for others. And this is an example of how close the parking is on some of the units. pay attention to temporary stuff because people will be living there while you're still finishing up. Shireen mentioned the issue when you're trying to show a unit under construction. Well, we had to pour some temporary sidewalks, right? Well, they sank, all right? And that might be Kristen's unit. No, good. All right, well, anyway, this is an issue that even though it was temporary, we had to repair it because whether the person who lived in the unit needed it, they might have guests who would. So even though it's temporary, it's something that we still needed to stay on top of. And there's a little quote from Mayor Dave, who likes Troy Gardens. And that's the end of that piece. And now, well, should we take questions or should we go on to the next piece? What do you think?
Yeah. Does anyone have?
We'll take some questions and we'll move on to the next section. Sure.
I was wondering if you talked about a couple of different ways of decisions being made, and I guess my assumption is that the basic layout of the units and maybe the buildings were done by the design committee, but then you referenced people choosing upgrades or choosing bamboo floors. So how finished were the units before you sold them, I guess is my question. Or how much did the individual home buyer get to choose? Did you have a lot of pre-sales?
Yeah, we had an extraordinarily high level of pre-sales. 29 of the 30 units sold before they were done, and which enabled virtually everybody to be able to choose some amount of upgrades, whether that was cabinets, flooring, the solar features, et cetera, et cetera. So we didn't have somebody who came in as a purchaser before we locked in the physical design of the building. You know, our ideal was that in our outreach relating to selling to folks with disabilities is identify a buyer before we finish our construction drawings so we could tweak out their unit to really meet their needs. And that would have meant having a buyer in hand in December of '05, even though we weren't breaking ground until March. You know, and so that's one of the challenges. If you could identify somebody that early, you could essentially do a custom unit for them without a lot of additional cost. So.
Now, on this, the parking look like it's asphalt?
Yes.
And then the sidewalks, are they
Asphalt.
asphalt as well? Did you guys look at like permeable pavement?
Oh, yeah.
For stuff like that? Was that just not feasible from a cost standpoint, or?
It was a few things. From a cost standpoint, number one, from a durability standpoint, that was a huge one. You know, the options that we looked at, number one, cost a lot more money, and number two, had a much shorter lifespan and were more difficult to maintain. And since, you know, 20 of the 30 homes were going to be owned by folks of modest means, we didn't want to saddle them with a real big long-term expense. So we had to strike a balance between environment and upfront cost and long-term maintenance issues. You know, if we had done the whole project with concrete, for example, instead of asphalt, less oil, it's not an oil-based product in the same way, but it would have been cost prohibitive. Okay. Any other questions? All right, now I'm going to turn things over to Shireen again. Oh, you got it. You want to use this or that?
I'll just use this. That's
Okay.
fine. I'm Shireen Smith, and I was the marketing and outreach director for the Land Trust, and I was in charge of marketing the units at Troy Gardens. And because we're kind of running short on time and we have some homeowners that have some incredible stories to share, I'm going to keep my little portion really brief. If you were here in the earlier session, again, it's the same thing that these guys are saying. You need to plan ahead. You need to get out there and get the word out that you have accessible units. Otherwise, no one's going to know about it and no one's going to come. So just getting the word out to different groups, like, you know, moving out, options in community living, all these different organizations out there. And I think one thing that I would really agree with that our keynote speaker was talking about was that there needs to be some kind of a network where we can kind of say, okay, this is what's available, and everyone can come to this one place and see. because it was really kind of frustrating to kind of always be in touch with all these different groups to make sure that everyone knew about these opportunities. So I would definitely agree with that. So yeah, get the word out early. Make sure that you're talking to people, getting the word out. And then another thing that's really, really important is to make sure that you're surrounding your organization with a good team. Your architect, he's got to know what he's doing. And then the other piece is kind of the whole financing piece, which is a really difficult issue, being that people with disabilities usually aren't making a lot of money. They're usually on SSDI. They might be working a job, a few hours a week, so there's not a lot of income there. So you need to make sure that you've got some lenders that know about all the different programs that are available for down payment assistance, like moving out and different programs like that. We have one of our lenders here. We actually had 4 lenders that we worked with that were awesome. All of them were familiar with first-time homebuying programs and kind of helped us teach our homebuyer education class. But we have asked Misha Peterson from Monona State Bank to come and kind of tell you all about her experience working with some of our buyers with disabilities.
Thanks, Shereen. I was asked to participate in a more direct way, I think late in 2005 by Shereen and Greg. I was experienced with the land trust. I had financed a couple of units in the anniversary court condominiums that they had done, so I understood the model. I think the other thing that led them to contact me was I have always done a lot of work with first-time home buyers and also with down payment assistance. And as Shereen has said, even at 109.5, it's very difficult to make these units affordable for people of modest means. So what you wind up doing is stacking together various sources of funding to make that all work. And I will say, with over 13 years of lending experience, these were probably some of the hardest deals I have ever done. My expectations when I started I wasn't totally sure how some of this was going to work, and was met with some interesting challenges. But certainly a few of these loans that I did were the hardest loans I've ever did, but certainly the most rewarding. Communication is totally the key. This was a very long process. In order to get the project off the ground, Greg and Shereen had mentioned that people needed to be pre-approved, and this was back in the beginning part of 2006. Closings weren't happening until the end of the year, so you were working with families for 6, 9 months, even longer, some of them. The other thing that I found working with people with disabilities is the group of people involved is enormous. Normally as a lender, I'm working one-on-one, maybe one-on-two with a couple. Occasionally there's some other influences there, but in the situation of people with disabilities, there's family, there's caregivers. I learned all about what a support broker is, and there's caseworkers. Then you're also trying to deal with, again, all of the funding sources. You're dealing with several nonprofit organizations, several government agencies, and this is all going on at the same time. And it was overwhelming at points, but again, so totally worth it. The other thing that sometimes came into play on a couple of the transactions is that the people that were actually borrowing the money have guardians. So the people that are your borrowers aren't capable or legally able to be your signers. So there's a whole bunch of extra paperwork things going on. Again, to get the payments to a point where people can afford these units, we had to put together financing packages that involved multiple layers of funding. I think on probably the vast majority of the packages, WHEDA, Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority, was the first mortgage program that was used. But then we layered multiple down payment assistance. The city has several programs. The Realtors Association has a program. We worked with Moving Out. And in one of the transactions, I had my first experience in also utilizing Section 8's homeownership program now, where instead of using your voucher to help you pay for rent, that same money can go into making a house payment. These sources through the course of the year are fluid. The pots of money fill up, they go empty. So again, started dealing with some customers, with borrowers in the early part of the year. When funding is available, find out that you can't reserve the funding for the period of time that we needed. By the time we got to the end of the project, the funding source had gone dry. So that was a little bit exciting. One of the biggest challenges is to try and figure out what to do first. Again, you're working with multiple agencies, multiple people, and it was hard to get a commitment from anybody because they would say, well, I'll do it if they'll do it, or I'll buy in if everyone else is going to play. So it was kind of like you had to stick out a proposal there, and hopefully nobody fell off the train as we were going down the street, because then the whole thing would collapse. So just in summary, I guess I would say that the financing certainly is a lot of work, but it was just very, very personally rewarding. I think I learned more on these Troy Gardens transactions than I had the entire other 12 years of my career. So, and I can take questions about the financing piece. Nope. She's going that way with the microphone. This lady.
You said you have multiple financing from WIDA, Realtors Association, Moving Out. What other forms of financing do you have?
The city of Madison has 2 different programs that we're able to utilize. The Land Trust also came forward with some down payment assistance money in this case. And again,
what are the 2 programs for the city of Madison?
we utilized Home Buy and American Dream. And again, that works specifically in the city of Madison. If we're talking about projects out in the county, there's other opportunities for things as well. But just the team of lenders that was put together was chosen because we have knowledge with that, and it's a bit of a specialty to put that financing together.
My name is Karen, and I'm a friend and worker of a family that lives at Troy Gardens.
Oh, good.
And yeah, when Shireen contacted Monona State Bank, did you have to kind of go to, like, say, your directors and your higher-ups at your organization to get their support, or did you have the authority to get these loans together, like yourself, based on your own knowledge, or did you have to convince somebody else to help support you?
I didn't have to convince anybody because I was already doing this type of work for other families outside of Troy Gardens. And Shireen knew of that from her prior job as well, so she knew me in that context. So,
thank you for doing that, and I hope that you can go on and encourage others to do what you've done. That's
Thank you.
Really great. Yeah.
Thank you, Misha. And I just want to say that Misha was like the hardest working lender at Troy Gardens. She was just awesome. So the next piece I want to talk about is lunch. No. Building community at Troy Gardens. This was a major piece for us, and it came into play with the marketing as well. Troy Gardens was based on co-housing. Traditional co-housing, as some of you might know, is where the homeowners actually plan the whole development and they kind of do everything. Well, ours is developer-driven co-housing. We had already made the plans, got the financing, did all of that. We just needed to find the buyers that were willing to live in more of an intimate community. One way to do that is to give them food, have potlucks, you know, things like that. But then also just to start having group building activities. And in this one you see right there is one of our homeowners, Kristen, and her mother, Connie. But just to get people talking about what kind of a community they want to have, what they envision, what they like, what they don't like, how they want to live, and just so people get to know each other before they actually move in. So there's actually a network that starts before they live there. And we felt that was really important for people with disabilities, to be in a safe community, a community where you know that the neighbors are watching out for you, that they know to look for certain things. If something doesn't seem right, they're going to look in on you and see if everything's okay. So that was a big piece for us at Troy Gardens. And the next person I want to introduce is Daniel Maffett. His sisters, Ann and Marge, are one of our buyers, and I'm going to have him come and talk. We actually, at one of our potlucks, we actually invited Dan and another sister and all of their caseworkers to one of our potlucks. Because Ann and Marge don't communicate very well, it's very hard to get to know them. And in our minds, if you can't get to know something, sometimes there's that fear that you're not sure how to interact. So to kind of break down that barrier, we invited their family to kind of come and talk. But Dan, why don't you come and tell us your side?
I appreciate the opportunity to be here today on behalf of my sisters. This is some of the pictures that we took as they were moving in, and some of the pictures we took at their birthday in February. Just to give you a little background on Marge and Ann, they were born in 1948, and due to a problem during birth, they're both considered mentally retarded. And in the early 50s, after, well, I'm the oldest of the 7, it got to be too much for Mom and Dad, and they had to institutionalize them at Southern Colony in Union Grove. They were there for 35 plus years. When they progressed far enough to be able to live in a non-environment like they had been, and they came to Madison, 2 or 3 different places. Orchard Hill out off of Fish Hatchery Road was the first place. Then they were deemed to be independent enough to be able to live on their own with a caregiver there for anything they needed in the evening and during the night, and also on weekends. Marge and Ann have developed far enough to be able to work part-time. Ann works almost full-time on their own, but they need assistance in everything, transportation, bill paying and everything, and Options in Madison has done that for years. The twins moved to several different apartments before last year, and last spring they approached me as legal guardian. It was Mom and Dad until 10 years ago, and then I took over after Mom's death and started talking to us about a place of their own. And I thought this was just absolutely impossible. How could it be? How could it happen? And well, they said, let us check out, let us see what we can find out. Well, I had read about Troy Gardens in the paper on my own. It was introduced one Sunday, I think, in the Wisconsin State Journal. And things developed. Yes, it's long-term. I started talking to Misha, I think, in June. Construction was still going on. The unit wasn't going to be ready until late fall or early winter. But that was okay because there was a lot of paperwork that had to be done, a lot of contacts that had to be made. And I can't thank Misha and Shireen and everybody that was involved in all of this enough for everything that they did putting this all together. There's no way Marge and Ann could have done it on their own, or I could have done it for them. And I can't tell you what it's meant for them to be independent, to have their own place, to have their own house. A lot of things came up in the course of this. Their lease at the place they were at ran out in July, so then it was, whoa, wait a minute, the new place isn't going to be ready until October or November. Turned out to be December, but that's okay. So what are we going to do in the meantime? And they went from a moderate-sized apartment to a little bitty apartment, and I mean really small. Now, you remember it's the twins and their resident caregiver, her husband, and their little three-year-old Santiago down here. So it was a process, but they put up with it very patiently for 4 months, 5 months, until they were finally able to move in just before Christmas. It's remarkable. I complimented the architect before the meeting on the way this is built, the way it was done. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect when I saw it the first time. I can't believe the thought and the planning and the processing that went into this. Many details, the efficiencies of the furnaces, the thickness of the walls, the insulation, the quality of the windows. The quality of the construction was absolutely fantastic. The materials used were first class. Little things like the air exchanger that was mentioned being so important on a tightly sealed house. It's critical. It really is, because if you have a tightly sealed house to keep out outside air penetration, you have germs, humidity, stale air, everything that needs to be exchanged. The outside air makeup units were standard. Top quality, everything all the way around. And I really appreciate everything that was done. I appreciate the opportunity that the twins had to get their own place out there. As a matter of fact, I lived on Blaine Drive, which is less than a mile from there, for 26 and a half years. I know the area, I know the north side. By accident, it happened to be that's where they ended up, but it's a great neighborhood. It's a great spot. It's right on a bus line. Grocery stores, everything is in the neighborhood. They're very independent, but another thing that Shireen mentioned about these potluck dinners, it was a great introduction not only for the girls to who their new neighbors would be, but also the neighbors who their new neighbors would be. And right away, Ann has virtually no ability to communicate unless you know her very, very well. Marge has some very limited speech, but I mean very limited. So right away I thought, oh, there's going to be all kinds of apprehension about having someone living in the neighborhood, in the unit, that they couldn't communicate with. And that's absolutely not the case. The first dinner we went to, everybody welcomed them with open arms, talked to them, conversed with them, and it's a type of community that just perfectly fits their needs, and I think they can contribute something to the neighborhood as well. They're very thoughtful, they're very caring about others, they both work, put in some time volunteering in different places, and well, it's just an opportunity. I'm just trying to give you some idea as to what it means to the family or an individual to have an opportunity for this. And we had the basement finished. I think you said maybe one of two basements that were finished completely for the caregivers. That's their apartment, their unit down there. Marge and Ann are completely independent on first floor, but the things that were done, the laundry facilities, you mentioned how important laundry is. Well, in the laundry area, the stairway that goes down the basement is right beside it. So usually what do? You wall it to the ceiling. No, they flattened it off, so it doesn't affect going down the stairs at all, but it gave them a 4-foot by 8-foot work table in the laundry area to sort and fold and put laundry together on. And little details like that that are just incredible. And I sat in on the first meeting this morning. They were talking about all the planning that goes into this and all the work that goes into it. And I'm very appreciative from a owner-occupied perspective that people are taking the time to help people like my sisters by building a place, offering a place, and then I can't say enough for all the financial assistance that the kids got. It was a question, I think, about where the funds were. I know at closing I was signing papers. I think there were 8 or 9 different contracts that were put together for the money to help them do this. And it's incredible because they did this on their own merits, with the help of everyone in the community. And I just want to thank everybody that was involved in it. It's an incredible opportunity, and I hope that places like this continue to be developed, because there's a real need out there. There's a lot of people who can gain a lot of help and assistance from this, and if there's anything I can do or anybody I can talk to, you let me know. Any questions? Okay. Shireen, thank you very much.
We're going to hear from another homeowner. This is Kristen Kilmark. So Kristen, if you would like to come up as well. Right here. Yep. Just make sure you speak in the mic.
I like living out at Troy Gardens for a variety of reasons. It is quiet. Getting to watch the sunsets, nice neighbors, and also sitting on the landscape committee. I like it because I get to make all the decisions over there. So, try to commute to work. I do have a roll-in shower for those. I do have a roommate that needs a wheelchair, and I have a roll-in shower, accessible bathroom. I was lucky to get an accessible unit that makes it possible to have a roommate who uses a wheelchair. When I need a new roommate, I will advertise for a roommate who will have my bathroom. That's all.
Thank you, Kristen. Connie, did you want to add anything? This is Kristen's mother, Connie Kilmark.
A few words. I'm a financial counselor in Madison for the last 30-some-odd years, and have been working on behalf of affordable housing pretty much since the time I started doing the work I do, because affordable and money management kind of go together. And as you know, the intimate details of the struggles people have to live with dignity and stability in housing, affordable is incredibly important. More than that, I think as I had children in this community, living here since '71, there's not enough volunteering I can do to repay Madison for the quality of life I've enjoyed. So being on a nonprofit board that helps affordable housing is a feature of whatever I do all these decades. Having Kristen as a daughter, she is a person who has autism and some cognitive disabilities. You may now know, because autism has been far more in the news lately, people with autism don't like change. And so when it was time to think about Kristen's future, Kristen and I thought together about the fact that if she was going to move out of the house she was born into and had grown up in, it needed to be the right move that was durable and could stay put, because people with disabilities in history have often been moved as it's been convenient for agencies or whatever, and that was simply not going to work in my daughter's case. And so we made a kind of a commitment to stability. Long-term affordability, not just of price at the beginning, but of maintenance ongoing, was crucially important because Kristen has support from supplemental security income. You've heard these words bandied about. SSI is different from SSDI, even though they both start with SS. So SS is, yes, I understand. SSI is supplemental security income. SSDI is for folks who have worked enough quarters to be able to achieve that. Kristen has a newspaper route in the afternoon near my home, but she has another supported job opportunity that she does at Warner Park. So we were thinking North Side long before we were even, Troy Gardens was even on the map. We had maps of possible neighborhoods, and the North Side is well organized. It lacked a grocery store at that time. The neighborhoods came together, lobbied for a long time, and now has a walkable grocery store. So between Warner Park, the bus line, Kristen is an authority on bus service. Any of you in this room need to know about bus service. Kristen has been published by Madison Metro as a believer in bus service. So when Troy Gardens came on the horizon and it had a bus stop literally right outside the property, Kristen couldn't have been better served by the fact that she would have her transportation, her housing, and now a garden plot where she may get some experience in gardening, all in the same package. In the disabilities community, there's a word called natural supports, and this is something that others have spoken about. Natural supports are those kinds of supportive neighbors or store owners you can trust that kind of know the situation. There's a market rate buyer who's a physician at Troy Gardens who said at one of the potlucks, "You mean another word for neighbors?" And in fact, of course, what many of you who are not in the disabilities community call neighbors, there's a special code word for people with disabilities. So I'd like to dump the word in Troy Gardens' particular situation and say there's nothing natural supportish about her neighbors. They're just neighbors, and those neighbors are part of the community that Kristen participates fully in, including being on the landscape committee. Finally, I'd like to say for all of the folks with disabilities, living in your family's home is not only an impossible situation for all of us. We can't make developmental leaps when we're living with mom and dad as they age, or even with just mom, in this case, a half Sicilian mom. I can't tell you what an impediment to development that could be. I will say, however, that it's terrifying for those of us who love people with disabilities, especially our children, because we have to trust the world, and we have to know that someday it will be the world that has to love and make our children safe. And of course, Kristen is no longer a child. She's 23 years old, a young adult. It was one of the most terrifying things I ever did to walk out her back door the very first time that I left her off. And as I said to Kristen at the door, "You know, Kristen, I'm a little scared." And she said, "Mom, don't worry, just leave. You have Jeff at home." So with those words, Kristen closed the door and went to sleep in her own home for the first time. And since that time, I can't tell which of us has changed more, whether Kristen has done more developmental leaps by making her own eggs, making her own lunches, making and doing things for herself that she couldn't do at my house because, you know, I was just sort of there. Or me, in the sense that I found other uses for those minutes in the morning when I was making lunch. Anybody in this town that can support the notion of affordable housing that's affordable forever and only gets more affordable as these homeowners turn over. This is a legacy not just for people like Kristen, but for folks that will contribute to our community in the future, because these homes are going to be becoming they're going to absorb more affordability, almost as if instead of absorbing more appreciation, they're going to become more accessible. So I'm proud to be part of this. I'm proud to have neighbors like Annie and Marge right across the parking lot where we can say hi to them occasionally. And I'm proud also when my daughter throws me out and says, "You need to leave now." And I do. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing with us.